Alright, so the embargo lifted for the press release reviews for Project Motor Racing, and it seems there's a lot of mixed opinions regarding if the game is ready for release or not. I spent pretty much all day yesterday looking at PC and PS5 reviews, and I looked at some live streams of people testing out different settings on computer, and there's a good amount to talk about here. It's looking like, in short, PC release has a little bit of problems that could come down to settings, optimization, hardware, or all three combined. PS5, on the other hand, is looking fairly polished for a day one release, so if you're looking to pick the game up on PS5, I'd say you're pretty solid for day one. I haven't played it yet, so grain of salt there. However, I will be primarily playing it on PC, since that's where I spend most of my time anyway. Now, I'm going to be throwing a lot of horsepower at the game itself. I'm going to be running a 9800X 3D and a 5090 GPU. If the game runs poorly with that hardware, we can't blame hardware at that point. But I spent a lot of time in Gamer Muscle's live stream today, and I noticed his setup was heavily CPU bottlenecked, meaning while the game should be completely rendered by the GPU, it looked like it was focused heavily on the CPU. His CPU was at times at 100% utilization, while his 5090 was only running at about 30 to 40% utilization. Now, he's running a 5800X 3D, which should be enough CPU to run a game like this. However, if the optimization is on the lesser side and it's focusing heavily on the CPU, then a 5800X 3D, unfortunately, is just not enough CPU by today's peak standards. I would say, from a hardware standpoint, the game needs work. It needs to optimize the parts that are there better, because if the game looks good on a PS5 and runs good on a PS5, a 5800X 3D is way more processor than should be needed to run that game. Now let's talk about the good things that I did see today. The game looks fun. Everyone seems to be ranting and raving about how good the game plays, from both a force feedback standpoint and a physics standpoint. However, it does look like the cars favor the AMS2 physics model more so than the ACC model, so if you're the person that likes ACC physics better than AMS, you might not entirely enjoy the Project Motor Racing physics. However, I'm currently playing AMS2, so clearly this is my game of choice if you've seen any of my streams. So that excites me for Project Motor Racing personally. Also, I'm learning it is really hard to do two things at once. Have a somewhat intelligent conversation and drive a car around the Nürburgring. It seems like most people think the game is fun, and that to me is the primary objective. And whenever you're playing a sim game or a game in general, you need to be having a good time. So obviously it was only a small sample size of what they could do. Obviously multiplayer was limited because it was a press release. That was at least my consensus from all the things that I watched today. I'd say graphics in the game are probably pretty middle of the road right now anyway. I would imagine that's going to get polished coming months to a year's time frame. We'll see what happens there, but as far as day one graphics go, I'm not too upset about the graphics as long as the game runs smooth. So in my opinion, where they need to focus is their frame rate. They need to make sure that they're utilizing the hardware correctly in computers. However, I'm speculating on everything because I didn't have early access to the game, so I have to wait until release day to play the game. The good thing is that there is going to be a day one patch. Every game gets a day one patch these days, so that's not exactly unexpected. However, hopefully that the press release drivers and everybody streaming it kind of, made them realize, like, okay, we need to get some of the frame rate stuff figured out before release day. Now, do I expect them to double the frame rate before release day? Absolutely not. However, I'd expect, 10-20% uplift if they can figure out how to unload the CPU and load up the GPU on some of the more mismatched options. But that being said, on Tuesday at 10 a.m. I will be live streaming the game, and I'm going to be experimenting with day one. I'm going to be running through everything. Settings, modes. I'm going to be running out there and seeing how it runs with just solo laps versus AI, because supposedly AI is what was a big part of what was taxing the CPUs. And like I said, I'll be throwing a 9800X 3D and a 5090 at it. And I've personally been building computers for almost 30 years now, so I have a little bit more time on computers than just, people who purchase pre-builts. So I'll be able to diagnose things a little bit better and see if where the hardware limitations actually are. Now, I know a 9800X 3D and a 5090 is not your typical PC build, and I get that. Basically what I'm trying to say is, if I have problems with the game, then there's an optimization issue that really needs to be addressed with it. But like I said, I'll find out more about that on Tuesday. I'm still very excited for the game. It looks like it's going to be a good time, and as long as they support it past release day, it's only going to get better. Are you still hyped for Project Motor Racing, or are you canceling your pre-orders and watching the world burn? Comment below, what do you think the best course of action is at this point forward? So for anybody who's curious how it plays on my setup, I'll see you all Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And hopefully I drive better than that in real life.